Well, UFC fans, we have reached the magic number. It is UFC 300 on the Big D podcast. Before I bring in Billy to describe all things history making and starting with the number 3, please subscribe, like, and share the Spunky Threaten Sports YouTube page where might be Masters Week, it might be UFC 300 week. Also, check out the Big D podcast for the audio listeners, Spotify, and Apple. So joining me, FantasyLabs Action Network. I think he's done about 758 baseball articles today. Billy Ward. So Billy, we're not in the twos anymore. We're in the threes.
Yeah, I mean, kind of. Like, there's been, I think someone posted this week, like 700 total UFC events. There were some numbered ones that they didn't really count, so we might have actually hit 300 already. Like, it's, it is what it is. We're playing a little bit fast and loose with that, but they still put together a great card. 3 title fights. I would argue 2 title fights, but that's a different story. So, yeah, it should be exciting. We've been looking forward to it for a while, slogging through some crappy cards.
I'm actually going to make it 2.5 title fights because the BMF belt is sort of a title fight, but it's sort of not.
I mean, I was okay with it being a title fight if people defended it and it stayed, but when they first did it, it was at 170, and Leon Edwards would technically be the lineal BMF champion if that belt changed hands every time you beat the guy who had it. So then we just pretended it didn't exist anymore when Masvidal retired and started it over at 155. But whatever, it's a fun fight. Holloway versus Gaethje, no complaints there.
Well, how about the main event? And we get to finally answer the true question. Who is the best light heavyweight in the world? Because we've got Alex Bahia and Jamel Hill fighting in the main event of UFC 300. Woo!
Yeah, I mean, hopefully. It's Wednesday, so let's not get too excited here because ever since John Jones's long run ended, the 205 division has just been a nightmare. Guy wins the belt, gets hurt. Different guy wins the belt, he gets hurt. We're kind of just playing fast. They tried to do a vacant title fight that turned into a draw. That never happens in the UFC. So, been weird, to say the least. But yeah, I think it's hard to argue that these aren't currently the 2 best, especially since we saw Yuri Prohaska lose a fight recently that he could have had a claim since he hadn't lost his belt either before giving it up. But I'm excited for it. Everyone who's listened to us on this podcast knows I'm a big Jamel Hill fan. Guy from around here. I've trained with some people from his team. We've been on some of the same cards. We have an opponent in common. Love me some Jamel Hill. But I'm a little worried. This is only a 9-month recovery from that torn Achilles he suffered last summer. It kind of seemed like making this fight was a little bit of an afterthought. Jamel Hill posted, they kind of asked him right before they announced it. It wasn't like this had been the plan all along. I think he would have liked to have another month or 2 before he came back. We've never seen, as far as I know, this kind of injury in UFC. We see it all the time in baseball, basketball, football players. Obviously less running and jumping in a fight than there is in an NBA game. I'm still concerned with how Jamal's going to perform. He does rely so much on footwork and explosiveness. Alex Bahia can kick the hell out of your legs. I think given the odds and the DFS salaries and stuff, I'm going to be pretty heavily invested on Bahia. The line feels about what it should be if there were no injury issues. But when we factor that in, it's kind of hard to say that, Pajeda's not a little bit undervalued.
Yeah, I thought Jamel Hill would be fighting maybe at the next pay-per-view in Vegas.
Or even, later in the year. Come back to Michigan. No, they're not going to do that, but you know what I'm saying.
I mean, Little Caesars Arena could just stand up and have a fight there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think they did 2 cards in Michigan after we regulated pro MMA, and I haven't been back since. So, who knows? But that's not what's happening. We got Jamel Hill, kind of, I guess, reclaiming. You could argue defending because he never lost the light heavyweight title out in Vegas, and it should be a good fight. I'm excited for it. Tricky one from DFS. If this were the only 5-round fight on the card, I would certainly stack it. Given that there's 3 of them, and it's going to be a little bit trickier, whoever loses this one probably has a pretty bad score. It's going to be, we would imagine, primarily a striking fight. You don't put up points as fast that way. And someone's going to get knocked out and end with very little because neither of them are super high volume strikers. I would say Hill has a little bit safer of a floor. He's a little bit more of a volume guy than Pereira. but you're going to be kind of disappointed with whoever loses this one. The winner's got a big ceiling. So from a cash game standpoint, I think you probably will need the winner of this one, but it's going to be a little bit tricky guessing who that's going to be.
I mean, stylistically, it's funny you say knockout because I don't think it's a question of somebody's going to be put to sleep. Somebody might be sleeping some sweet dreams. So, but Alex Pereira is one of the most dangerous knockout artists I've ever seen. I mean, he can put you away with one fell swoop. I mean, maybe it was a little bit of a quick stoppage in the last fight against Yuri, but it might have delayed the inevitable. And then Jamel Hill just explosive. I mean, we'll see how explosive he is coming off the torn Achilles because, I mean, what Jamel Hill did against, Rolf Teixeira showed me something, but I think if I'm Hill, I try and take this to the mat because I don't want Alex Pereira kicking my left leg all night.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I was going to mention something to that effect, that he's the more well-rounded martial artist, right? He's been a mixed martial artist for a long time. You know, that was his combat sports training, whereas obviously Pereira came up as a kickboxer. But, you know, it's not like we see him do a lot of that. It's hard to just suddenly turn yourself into a wrestler just because of the matchup. And he's said in interviews and stuff he wants to try to stand up with him. Guys say a lot of things in interviews that don't end up being true, but it's certainly something to keep an eye on. So, yeah, I mean, again, even from a DFS standpoint, he's probably the likelier of the two to get a takedown, but I'm not sure that he's ever gotten one in the UFC. I'd have to check. So, you know, we're not banking on that by any stretch.
0-0-0-0-0-0-0-0.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think takedown is in either fighter's code necessarily.
Well, Pereira has a couple, so he's actually shown that when he's fighting strikers, he'll do it, or maybe just the one against Izzy, but that's something. He might have even attempted another one against Izzy. No, not in the second one, but he will opportunistically, I think, go for it more than Hill will, but maybe he shouldn't. I don't know. It'll be interesting. I'd love to see some grappling in this one, just as from a curiosity standpoint, but I know everyone just wants to see knockouts.
I mean, honestly, do you think are you worried about Jamel Hill's quick recovery from a torn Achilles? Because we see guys, athletes in other sports, whether it be Kevin Durant or guys coming back from the torn Achilles. Heck, even Giannis with his calf/Achilles strain. Do you worry that Jamel Hill might be coming back too quick for this fight?
Yeah, I do, and that's what we were saying earlier. With maybe this wasn't the original plan, and they kind of needed a big fight, so he said yes when he otherwise wouldn't have. But we truly don't know. Like I said earlier, we have no idea. We have no prior background to look at in terms of UFC fighters with this injury. It's reasonable to think that the recovery should be faster. You're not sprinting full speed. You're not jumping all that often or that hard. It's not the exact same demands on that tendon. He hurt it playing basketball. He didn't hurt it doing anything martial arts related. So yeah, I'm worried. I would make this line currently Pereira minus 125, Jamal Hill plus 105 on DraftKings. I'd say that's about right if we knew Hill was healthy. Maybe a little bit more towards his side. I just don't think it's factored enough into the betting line and therefore the DFS salaries.
Yeah, because when I saw the salary, I fully expected Pereira to be like at 87 and Jamal Hill about 75, 76. They're more even than I thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. I mean, but there's so many fights on the card too that throws it off because they don't like to make two fighters the same thing, even though they have Andrade and Rodriguez both at 8,100, which we almost never see.
Instead of 8,000, 8,200, right?
Right. Well, they got another one of those, so they can't have. They could. I don't know why they feel like they can't, but for whatever reason, they felt like they could not do two fights at 8,082.
Well, in terms of main event name recognition, it's different than the UFC 100 where Brock Lesnar was fighting Frank Mir, or UFC 200 where my memory serves me right, Conor McGregor was the main event of that card.
Yeah, I mean, the only real way to get that kind of star power currently would be to get McGregor to come back, which who knows what's going on there. That's a whole different story. Or John Jones. Like, those are really the only stars they have of that magnitude these days. And John Jones wasn't ready because of the torn pec, and McGregor is doing whatever McGregor's doing. And he says he wants to fight. The UFC says they want him to fight. Chandler wants to fight. They haven't booked the fight. So who knows what's going on there? That's an entirely different discussion. But yeah, it's definitely, it's a great card top to bottom, but there's not that one like, oh my God, I can't believe we're going to get to see this fight at the top.
Actually, I lied. 200, that was Amanda Nunes rear naked choking Misha Tate.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of women, how about a cutoff to the first all-Chinese title fight for the women's strawweight belt between Weili Zhang and can you explain? Can you pronounce the
Yan Xiaonan.
huh?
Yan Xiaonan.
Yeah, Jana.
Yan, but yeah. I mean, to get to the fight, Wiley's like minus 500. There's not really a great title challenger for her. Honestly, it doesn't feel like anyone at 115 has really excelled to the point. Like Yan's on a, I should specify, Yan Xiaonan is on a 2-fight winning streak. She had lost 2 fights right before that. This is kind of like, we got to have her fight somebody, not really anyone around at 115. Much like we saw, during the run of Alex Volkanovski at 45 in a little bit when they're throwing some guys out there. It's like, yeah, I don't know. I'm not too excited about this fight. I believe Wiley is the most expensive fighter. No, she's cheaper than Kayla Harrison and Bo Nickel. I'm not getting there in DFS. I don't see how she pays that off with a super quick win, but it should be a pretty straightforward victory for Wiley here. And hopefully someone will emerge at 115 as a little bit more credible of a threat in the near future. But I don't know I don't see anyone there that strikes me as all that likely to do so.
Yeah, I mean, does Weili even tempt you from a cash standpoint? I mean, she got, 8 million points in her last fight.
Yeah, she does. It's just tricky because Kayla Harrison could get 1 million takedowns if she makes weight. Bo Nickel could have 5 takedowns and a first-round stoppage against Cody Brundage. It's hard to find the salary. Like, obviously, if I could, I'd obviously want to play her. Like, if you pull her in some Rainmakers packs, you're thrilled with it because she's going to score a lot of points. But, it's a balancing act on whether you can really afford it if you're trying to build a balanced lineup, possibly get Bo and squeeze in a bunch of favorites.
Yeah, that's the problem. That's the problem with this card because everybody's a wrestler outside the main event and the BMF belt. Everybody's a wrestler.
Yeah, at least most of the higher price fighters. There's a lot of people with plenty of takedown upside in and around 9,000 with, probably not Davey Figs. Maybe. Honestly, wouldn't shock me. But yeah, Kayla Harrison and Bo Nickel, especially. You got Armin Tsarukyan a little bit cheaper. Depends on how you think that fight's going to go. But for 8,700, if he can and wants to take down Charles Oliveira's a guy who accepts takedowns. He's fine to let you take him down and play in his guard. So there could be a lot of takedowns there too. Hard to get to Wiley, but as you pointed out, she certainly has the upside to score a ton of points. I'm just not sure that I prefer her over Bo, even with the $200 savings.
It might
$300.
Could Weili be a better GPP play then? Because everybody's going to try and play Bo Nickel because they know he'll get 59 takedowns or whatever.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a ton of sense. And in a weird way, like, Bo probably has a better shot of scoring. Like, he's a safer bet to score 100 than Wiley just because he scores fast. He typically wins so fast, and Cody Brundage is not great. But Wiley probably has a better shot at scoring 130 because the fight goes longer. She gets a bunch of takedowns and a bunch of strikes and still picks up the 3rd-round finish. And will probably be lower ownership. So these are totally not set in stone because it's early, but I've made 3 GPP lineups. 2 of them have Zhang, 1 of them has Bo. Neither of them have Kayla Harrison for how I'm handling the expensive fighters.
I mean, with what we saw last week, it seemed like nobody could make weight.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna probably get to some Kayla. I want to see her make weight first, but the bigger problem is that no one has the ability to suck the life out of a fight and thus the DFS scoring like Holly Holm. Like her whole game plan is to hug you up against the fence and chip away. Nobody's scoring points when that happens. Like I should go back and do the math on it, but I would guess if you looked at like the total points scored between her and her opponent in all of her fights, it's got to be one of the lowest in the UFC. I'm not going to do all that because that would take me forever to look up every fighter, but I would bet it's extremely low, especially on a per round basis because she's had a lot of 5-rounders. But
Then, how about the BMF belt between Justin Gaethje and Max Holloway? Whew, that would be a striking match. I mean, when I heard this fight announced, I'm like Justin Gaethje is going to kick the crap out of Max Holloway.
yeah, I don't think he just starches him. I mean, Holloway's been a very durable guy. He takes a lot of shots. He won a fight while taking the most significant strikes ever, like in a fight, and still won and looked great. Like clearly won it. It wasn't like a split decision or anything like that. So that one, I don't always love these striker on striker matchups for DFS because we need takedowns, we need finishes. But these guys both throw with such an extreme amount of volume that's probably the one that I'm going to stack for cash games. And I want to be heavily invested on it for GPPs as well, just because even if it goes to a decision, we've got 5 rounds, which helps. And then the guys just do so much volume that on a per minute basis, they're going to be scoring really, really well.
Because at 155, Justin Gaethje just scares the living bejeebus out of me. He put Dustin Poirier to sleep in last year. And Max Holloway, for a pound basis, one of the most consistent strikers, never gets tired. But again, we're in the featherweight fighter going to lightweight, which doesn't necessarily equal success.
Yeah, no, I think Gaethje is the A side here and more likely to win it. If Holloway does, it's going to be just a massive volume attack, right? Like he's landed 10 strikes per minute to Justin's 7 or whatever. Both guys average over 7, so it's kind of hard to go into a fight thinking you're just going to put a pace on Justin Gaethje because that doesn't really happen. But Holloway's never been knocked out in his career. He's fought some really tough strikers in that span. Kind of only guy to make Alexander Volkanovski in his prime look human until Volkanovski went up to 55 and blah, blah, blah. Beat guys like Yair Rodriguez, Calvin Kattar, Arnold Allen, knocked out Jose Aldo twice back in 2017. Not a guy that you're going to just run through as a striker. So, love the fight. Should be a lot of fun. Great DFS fight. No complaints here with the matchmaking.
I'm not complaining. Because when you want two guys who just go at it, this feels like one of those fights.
Yeah, and you throw it in your cash lineup, and you've got a pretty reasonable shot at pushing 200 points between the two of them. So,
if Justin Gaethje wins this fight, you think he could be next in line for Makhachev?
I don't think the timing of that is going to work out because Islam's been out for a while. Maybe. He could be. I don't know. I would love to see the winner of Charles Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan get the next shot, even though both guys have already fought Islam. Justin Gaethje's not on some huge winning streak here, right? He lost to Charles Oliveira, lost to Khabib in 2 of his last 5 fights. Arman, he technically has 2 losses in the UFC. He did not lose to Mateusz Gamrot. That was a horrible decision. His only other loss was to Islam. It was Arman's debut. He took it on short notice, and he took Islam to a decision and won a round off of him. So that's a fight I would love to see again. Charles Oliveira, kind of same thing. Don't think we need that rematch. So it might be a situation where if Tsarukyan wins, he kind of gets first dibs. If he doesn't, maybe it's Gaethje. I don't know. We'll have to see. And a lot of it's just so much to do with timing as well.
And plus, we know Makhachev can only fight in certain areas. He's not going to fight in Vegas. He's going to fight in 1 or 2 areas, or maybe 1 area.
I don't know that we know that with Makhachev. That seemed to be the case with Hamzat as of late, but I don't know that that's necessarily the case. I'm pretty sure he's had some Apex card fights and all kinds of stuff. So, yeah, let me look real quick. His last fight was in Abu Dhabi or Saudi Arabia or whatever. But the first Volk fight was in Australia. Makhachev went there. And then when he fought Charles Oliveira, that was Abu Dhabi. Okay, so yeah, we're skewing heavy to Abu Dhabi, but before he won the title off Oliveira, he fought at the Apex. So I don't think we have to worry about that too much.
So that would be. So I mean, maybe an October fight.
I could see it before that, especially if Sarakian wins it. You know, like we've seen longer layoffs from the older guys like Gaethje and Holloway, but I could see Sarakian being like, "Hey, let's run this in July or whatever."
I'm trying to think because, yeah, that would be fun, and it'd be a different fight because we've seen Oliveira, and I mean, would Gaethje really be able to handle Makhachev on the ground? Plus, Makhachev's a better striker than Khabib.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest, not really interested in Gaethje versus Makhachev at this point. Like, we saw him get subbed by Charles Oliveira, and we saw him get subbed by Khabib. So, like, we kind of know the book, right? He's 35, which, as we know, for lightweights is kind of past the point. And we've seen him lose pretty clearly to two grappling-based lightweight champs before. So what would we expect to be different this time, you know?
He'll be tapping out.
What was that?
So he'll be tapping out in that case.
Yeah.
So with the title fights, this is still a stack called Charles Oliveira fighting Sarakian, Bo Nickel fighting Aljamain Sterling going up in weight class, Kayla Harrison finally making her UFC debut against Holly Holm. I mean, I think Holly Holm's been fighting for about 29 years, right?
Yeah. I mean, we got Yuri P on the card against Alexander Rakic. I'm pretty excited for that one. You know, Rakic, he's 14-3 as pro. It's been a long time that he's been out. I think his last fight was, 2022 against Blachowicz. But his two UFC losses are a split decision that most people thought probably should have gone his way, and then the injury against Blachowicz. That could be for the next 205 shot, so that's a fun one. You mentioned Bo Nickel. I don't know. Like, can after this one, can we give him a tough fight? Like, that's enough. We know he's good. You've proven it to everyone. But yeah, the Sterling versus Cater fight, there's an argument that those guys are at least close to the next 145 title fight. I'd love to see Sterling versus Ilia Topuria at some point in the near future if, before it's too late on Sterling, because he's kind of getting up there, especially for the lighter weight classes. So I'm excited for that one, kind of pulling for Aljo. What else do we got? Yeah, I mean, Sadiq Youssef versus Diego Lopez, not as important of a fight for the division, but Sadiq is, extremely fun to watch. Diego Lopez, this crazy grappler. He's Alexa Grasso's jiu-jitsu coach. So, if that gives you some context to the kind of energy he's bringing. Cody Garbs versus Davey Figs, two former champions fighting in the prelims, or the opening fight. That's fun. And then we got Jim freaking Miller. We'll see if Bruce Buffer actually reads it. Just, fun card all the way through.
By the way, funny story about Jim Miller. He fought at UFC 100
Yep.
and fought at UFC 200.
Yeah, which is the only reason he's on the card, but, sure, let's do it again. Why not? That'll be fun. Bobby Miller's, an appropriate fight, or Bobby Green is an appropriate fight. Two veterans, been around a long time. A lot of performance of the night bonuses, so, yeah, I'm looking forward to that one, too. Again, doesn't really matter for the division. Neither of them are fighting for a title, but should be fun.
Just a fun fight. Just a fun fight in general, right?
Yeah, which the UFC doesn't do enough of lately. I feel like they're just sticking guys to try to build one up and not the other one or whatever. But this one, it's really legitimately okay, cool. That should be a banger. Doesn't have to mean anything. Let's have a night, guys.
Boys have at it. So
what was that? I'm sorry.
Boys have at it.
Yeah, exactly.
How are we going to do?
I didn't even mention. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Money Moicano coming back after he just announced his 62-year-old dad had a kid right before his last one. I'm rooting so hard for Moicano to win just so he gets another interview because that guy's great. Definitely want to hear more from him. I just did a breakdown of that fight at Action Network, so anyone listening, if you want to see how I'm betting it, not going to reveal it here. You can go click the article.
Mm-hmm. How are we going to make our cash line? Because we've got 3 5-round fights, so my head's going to be spinning. Because to me, I think there's one fight we both like. We both want to stack, and then what?
Yeah, I think I'm starting with both of the BMF fighters. You got to take a stand on Pereira versus Hill. I'm leaning towards Pereira, but that's not like a super strong, confident opinion. And then you can get Wiley in there, but then you have to find somebody else cheap you like, which is not the easiest on this card. Like playing around with it, if you do those 4, and like I like ERP on the slightly cheap side, but then you're stuck with either like Marina Rodriguez, Andrade, or Rakic, which doesn't really do much. I love Sterling at his price. I think he should put up a really good score against Calvin Kattar, who's not nearly the wrestler he is. But it makes it hard to fit if you're intent on getting one of each of the title fights. So, going to be interesting. I don't think you necessarily have to play someone from all 3 fights, but obviously you kind of feel like you want to because it's going to be really annoying at the end of the night. Sitting there, seeing all that cash coming in, and then just watching it fall off as we get to the 2 actual title fights.
But then if you play the BMF fighters, you play Welly, and then play one of Pereira or Hill. Guess who you can't play? Bo Nickel.
Yeah, I think if you're gonna do that, you almost have to make it Jamal Hill, right? Like, I don't mind that strategy if you think Jamal Hill's gonna win, because that kind of leaves enough salary that you can still at least fit like someone like Aljo or some moderate favorites there. But if you want the Pereira side, that makes it really hard to do.
Like I just mixing right now. I just made a lineup with Holloway, Gaethje, Yuri, Bo Nichols, Sterling, and Jamel Hill.
Yeah, so I don't think you can really afford to go up to the Wiley, Zhang, and up. I don't know that you need any of those people for cash, because if you feel strongly that Arman Sarakian, Jalen Turner, Diego Lopez, Aljo, if you feel like any of those guys can even kind of compete with them on a scoring basis, it just makes so much more sense to get one extra favorite. On the flip side, though, if there's someone at the bottom that you like, if you think Cody Garbrandt at 7,100 or Renato Moicano at 73, if you feel strongly about one of those guys pulling an upset, then obviously it makes it reasonable to try to get up to Bo, Kayla, Wiley. Probably not Kayla, but that price range, I should say.
You think there's a chance Kayla makes weight?
I think there's a chance. I don't think she would have signed the contract and agreed to all this if there wasn't a chance. I think I'd make her a favorite to make weight, just knowing the kind of athlete she is. She's, been competing in sports where she's had to weigh in for 30 years at this point. With that said, it's not really about making the weight. It's like, can she make weight and also perform at a reasonably decent level? That's going to be the real question.
Well, I mean, if Alex Pereira can make 185, I think Kayla can make, 135?
But 20 pounds for a woman at 150, going from 155 to 135, especially for a woman, is so much different than going from 205 to 185. Like, just proportionally, it's a much bigger percentage of their total weight. So women hold more water anyway, higher body fat percentages. It's definitely a challenge. Like I said, I think she'll get there, but I think she might be a zombie by the time it actually happens.
Yeah, hopefully we don't have 4 fighters missing weight, because that was ridiculous last week.
Well, let me say that though, if we're gonna get 2 fighters that miss weight, it'd be awesome if they could do it against each other again. That was perfect. Did you hear the story on that one, by the way? It came out after Cornell said. Also, I bet Cornell to win by knockout at 1,100 to 1. So you're welcome, everyone who followed that. It came out after, I guess, Mullins' camp called and said, "Hey, we're not going to make weight. Are you cool if we just stop cutting?" So it wasn't really they missed weight. They re-signed the agreement to be 138. So that one kind of worked out. They both came in a little heavy. They both looked jacked. So I get why they were heavy. So yeah, that one I'm okay with. The other 2 were a little bit rough. Like Cynthia Calvillo, 0-5 in her last 5 and missed weight. So don't like to see that. But again, if we're gonna have some guys miss weight, do it against each other.
Or don't be a Charles Oliveira against Justin Gaethje and miss by a half pound, right?
It's interesting you mentioned that, because Justin Gaethje, when he won the BMF belt, he weighed in at 156, which is not championship weight. So if you need a data point on whether this is a real belt or not, I'm just saying check Justin Gaethje's weigh-ins. Those guys, I think at 156, they'll still call this a title fight. I would even bet they could weigh in at 159, 162, whatever the hell they wanted, and we would still pretend it's a title fight.
Yeah, I was just thinking, when was Max Holloway's last lightweight bout?
I believe he took one on short notice somewhere in there, but it's been a while since he fought there like regularly. I'd have to go through and click like every little plus button on 19 different topology. But yeah, it's been a while, but he's getting older. He's probably put on some strength. He's had plenty of time to prepare for this one. I don't think it's a huge disadvantage the way it is when you kind of just randomly pop in for one.
Do you think UFC 300 offers? I mean, how do you compare UFC 300's card to 100 and 200? Because I'm not sure we have the names, but I think we've got a bunch of awesome fights on this card.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can really make that apples to apples comparison. If you look back, even when they were doing 200, but especially when they were doing 100, there was like 6 or 7 pay-per-views a year, maybe 10-ish fight nights. You could get all the stars on one card because you didn't need to do a card 40 times a year the way they do now. And that was before the UFC kind of leaned away from building their own stars. Now that they want the UFC to be the star, they don't want individual guys to stand out. So, yeah, I mean, obviously the star power isn't what it is, but the UFC is the star now, right? It's UFC 300. People know what that means. People aren't as invested in any individual fighter. With that said, the one thing that's similar is they went out of the organization to sign arguably the biggest star they could to come in, much like they did with Lesnar before. Not that was directly for 100, but you know what I'm saying. So getting Kayla Harrison over, I think, is something that we haven't seen them do a lot. They did it with Michael Venom Page this year. I like those signs that they're signing some of the big stars from outside the org, but other than that, it's not the same vibe. This is an established machine that runs every week. We just kind of put the best ones we had all on one. But we're going to be back in 3 weeks with another pay-per-view with more title fights. So you got to save something.
Which title fight do you wish was fighting on this card, if anyone else?
I don't know. From not from an entertainment standpoint, but from a just like, damn, he deserves it standpoint, would be Bilal Muhammad versus Leon Edwards. Because why are we not making that fight? Bilal's won $1 million in a row. The easy answer is and this probably will never happen, but John Jones versus Tom Aspinall. That'd be awesome. But I think Jones is going to beat Stipe, vacate the belt, and then we've got this whole crop of young heavyweights who are going to fight over it. That'll be fun too, but
Yeah, I mean, while Leon Edwards might not be the most appealing fighter, you know what he does? He wins. I mean, he beat Usman twice and then beat Colby Covington in December. Why not? Why is he not fighting? Or maybe he'll be fighting when the UFC goes overseas. Because you imagine what would happen if he got another pay-per-view in London.
Yeah, I don't think it has anything to do with Leon Edwards. I think Leon Edwards is enough of a star in his own right. Big knockouts and all that stuff being what they are. But it's, for whatever reason, the UFC just hates Bilal Muhammad. He's not the most exciting fighter. I get it. Knocked out Sean Brady and was fun in that fight. I don't know what the deal is, but yeah, it has way more to do with Bilal than it does Edwards. The story was they offered Edwards a few different fights at 300, including against Makhachev, with Makhachev stepping up. And, they tried to have him get Khamzat, they tried to do Makhachev, but all the other guys turned it down. Khamzat probably can't make 170. Makhachev didn't want to come up. So, yeah, they wanted a Leon Edwards appearance against somebody. They just didn't want it to be Bilal Muhammad.
Which would be the best fight?
I don't know that it would be the best fight from a excitement or entertainment standpoint, but it's the most logical fight,
Yes. All right, Billy. So there are 300 reasons to be excited for 300 this weekend, and I think we talked about all of them.
Yeah, it should be a good card. I'm looking forward to it.